Welcome back to the show. We've got John Deaton here to discuss the massive Ripple victory and the huge SEC loss, motion denied. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
The one and only. And let me tell you, John, before I even get into this thing about the decision right here, SEC being denied, I want to shout you out for the book that you've written. It is remarkable. It's riveting. It is powerful. It is the kind of book that I believe if enough people read this, people are going to change their lives because of this book, because you are a living success story. And it's not just as simple as that. You've been through so much. And to be where you are today and the kind of person you are today, because the kind of person you are today represents over 75,000 XRP holders. John, thank you for being here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, I hope the book, if you read it, you're like, God damn, I can't believe he admitted to all that shit. But hey, no one can blackmail me now, Brad.
That's exactly right, man. And I tell you, it is a powerful book, and I was absolutely blown away. And I hope that everybody goes out and gets that book, because it can change your life if you read that book and just feel the empowerment that you have within yourself. And in fact, I want to invite you to come sit with the DPMG, our private group, because we talk about wealth creation mindset, what it takes to focus, and really talk about some aspects in this book where you really picked your path, because nobody else could. You did. And I think that inside of each individual is always fascinated me, and it always will. So I'd love to have you inside of there. But let's talk about this case.
Let's talk about it, brother.
Motion denied. Talk to me here, John.
Well, listen, everything is played out perfectly as far as the case as it goes for XRP holders, Brad. And, the SEC just can't get out of their own way. And when they asked for this interlocutory appeal, to me, it was another mistake. And I even tweeted out, I said, listen, she's going, because you got to remember, they first have to ask permission to file the motion. And I said, she's going to grant that. And then she's going to write a second ruling that explains in detail her first ruling, which will then make it even more bulletproof on a real full appeal. And that's basically what happened. And basically she said to them, no, you don't get to do an early appeal, an interlocutory appeal. And let me explain to you why. And then she just laid it out. And, it's great news for XRP holders. It's not as great to be honest with you, for the full crypto market. It's very specific to XRP, because when the ruling came out and she said that programmatic sales were not securities because of the blind bid ask scenario, she even said, I didn't understand why people were making such a big deal about her ruling, because she said in her first ruling, she said, sure, some XRP holders, no doubt, bought for speculation and probably relied on Ripple, but the SEC didn't prove it. Right. And that's all she said. The evidence in this case doesn't prove it. And so the rest of the crypto market, celebrated it, because they were like, well, the same thing applies to every other token. And you had Judge Rakoff that people made a big deal about in the Terraform case, because he said he's not agreeing with Judge Torres's ruling. And that in that case, he said it's possible that people bought Terra Luna on an exchange relying on Do Kwon and all of that. And that, she never said otherwise, right? She said the SEC didn't prove it. So in this case, she said in this ruling, Brad, she said, look, I never said that there couldn't be a crypto token sold on an exchange that is a security. I just said it's not XRP, and it's not in this case. And so, and all she did was explain the facts and what she relied on. And she cited again that many XRP holders didn't even know who Ripple was as a company when they first acquired XRP. And so basically all she did was said, Gary, you're right. Gary Gensler, you're right. Howie is a fact and circumstance test. And I applied the facts and the circumstances, and XRP on exchanges, in this case, were not securities. End of story. And so the interlocutory appeal was denied because the only time an interlocutory appeal gets granted, Brad, is when the appellate court doesn't have to look at the facts. It's just a pure issue of law. And she said, no, I applied the facts to the case. The XRP affidavits is one of the facts. I applied these facts and came up with this ruling. And she just takes the SEC to school, and she solidifies her first ruling so much even better. And really, as I said yesterday, it really shows you that XRP really is the only asset. If we take Bitcoin out, because Gensler just said, he didn't think it was a security, but as far as legal status, XRP is the only one that has the pure legal status of not being a security.
It's remarkable. It is remarkable. Now, does this, just for clarity, because I think I understand, but it's best to hear it from you, where does this stand as far as the institutional sales, right? And that decision that was made in that regard? Nothing changes there. And what about the pursuit of Brad and Chris? When are they going to stop dragging their good name through the mud?
Well, that's a great question as always. And the judge basically said, yes, that was one of the reasons to deny the interlocutory appeal. You do an interlocutory appeal when there's not a lot left in the case, right? It's just a matter of legal issues. She said, here, we have a whole trial to do. And then after that, if you want to go up on appeal, that's fine. And so she said, interlocutory appeal denied, and she gave a schedule. And she said that the trial of Brad and Chris, if it happens, and that's a big if, we can talk about it if you want.
Yes.
Is April 23rd of 2024. And she said on December 4th, all the parties must submit certain motions. These are trial motions where you argue that, a document or an email shouldn't be used as evidence, that the jury shouldn't see it. Bill Hinman could be a motion in limine where the SEC says, Judge, we want a ruling that Bill Hinman doesn't have to testify, things like that. That all has to come up on December 4th, brother. So she's keeping a very tight schedule for this trial. Yeah. And she's basically saying to the SEC, okay, you want to prove the case against Brad and Chris? Here's your chance. Now, the question is the SEC going to really go to trial against Brad and Chris on a reckless standard? Really? Right? Yeah. And remember, for aiding and abetting, and that's the charge against them, that they aided and abetted Ripple, the company, in helping facilitate institutional sales. In order to be found responsible, kind of like guilty in a criminal case, but we call it responsible in a civil case, the jury has to believe that Brad and Chris were reckless in not knowing that XRP was a security. And so let's put it in perspective. Brad Garlinghouse in 2015, we'll just take 2015. For Chris Larson, it's 2013, that the SEC lawyers, right, the enforcement lawyers, they can own and trade XRP all the way up to 2019. Yep. But Brad is reckless in not knowing that XRP is a security in 2015? Like, right? Do we really think that a jury is going to believe that they were reckless? No, of course not. And so all the leverage is gone for the right. The leverage the SEC has right now, Brad, is this: they do have a summary judgment ruling for a significant amount of money on paper, $700 million in institutional sales. Now, Ripple can challenge that, and in a remedies hearing, they could say, look, judge, ODL should be excluded from this period to this period. And judge, that represents half. I'm just picking these numbers out of my, thin air. And now they've reduced it to $400 million. And then they say, well, you need to reduce these other legitimate expenses. And then maybe they can get it down to a couple $100 million, right? The SEC's leverage is, as of right now, it's $700 million. Ripple's leverage is, let's go to trial. You're going to waste more money. And then we're going to appeal certain things if you appeal it and tie them up more. Or we're willing to come to the table and write a check if you say you're not appealing it, XRP is not a security. We can sell to institutions moving forward without you worrying about us and without you prosecuting us in the future, and we're going to IPO. And if you agree to all that, SEC, here's a check. Now, you and I could pick what number that is. I don't know. Is it 100 million? Is it 500 million? Is it 200 million? But I can tell you this, if it's a couple $100 million, Gary Gensler would be able to get on TV and say, I held Ripple responsible and I helped secure one of the highest settlements in SEC history at hundreds of million, whatever it is. And he could get a victory, at least publicly. All of us in crypto world would know that it's not really a victory, but the public wouldn't know that. Yeah. You know what I mean? The general public who's never heard of XRP, right, or Bitcoin even that much, they would say, oh, wow, that's a pretty good result. And so it makes you think that that's what probably would happen.
Do I understand it right? The SEC has really put themselves in a position here, not just with Ripple over XRP, but if they're not careful, if they keep pushing the envelope here, they're going to lose that jurisdictional overreach that they've been that we've seen over the last 2.5+ years, right? I mean, if they continue down this road, it's really going to put them into a corner where they can't go forward. So now I got to ask you, because I need a thumbnail. You know what I mean? So we need to know. I've always thought this thing was going the distance to the Supreme Court. But after what we just saw here today, and I understand that they can certainly appeal after the case is over in a general appeal. I don't know what in the world they would do that for or on what merits. But what is the likelihood now with the denial of this motion that we see a settlement in this case, John?
I think that the percentage is high that they're going to start finally talking. I mean, at the SEC, you can only imagine, as far as I'm concerned, there's a brick wall and the SEC is doing this, right? They're just slamming their head against the brick wall. At some point, you got to stop and say, this isn't going to work. Yeah. And let's get a victory, because the language in this case, really, it's the judge says that she never said that a digital asset sold on an exchange couldn't ever be a security. And she said, in fact, she says the other enforcement actions that the SEC is bringing up, because the SEC said, look, we deserve an interlocutory appeal because your summary judgment decision is impacting all our other cases, right? Coinbase and all these others. And the judge said the other enforcement actions cited by the SEC involve different digital assets and different companies which offered and sold those digital assets under different factual circumstances and economic realities. And so it really is just about XRP. And so the SEC could take this language and say, look, she just said only XRP is under these facts is not a security. She implied that the other ones could be. So that would make me, if I'm the SEC, I would hang my hat on that language and then try to get a good, nice big check from Ripple to secure some kind of political victory to go after the others. Right now, that's not great for all the other cryptos out there in the world, because it's what you had to say. They don't have a $200 million war chest that they can fight. But that's what this judge did. So I think that, they have to come to the table, or they just dismiss the case against Brad and Chris, right? They could do that. They could just say, we think we're going to lose, so we're dismissing the aiding and abetting, and go straight to the remedies section and then a full appeal. You know what I mean? That's possible.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is, like, could we see them dismiss the case between Brad and Chris and then go to a general appeal? And if they did that, John, what do you, and I mean, we can't know, but what in the world would they appeal at this point?
Well, it would basically, that's what I'm saying, is that she made this ruling even more appeal proof. Yes. It really is. It's a bulletproof appeal. And listen, is it possible that I'm wrong? Sure. But I got to tell you, so far, we've been predicting this pretty accurately. Yeah, and when she says that, look, all those other tokens and other cases got nothing to do with us. She literally said the SEC has been saying repeatedly, it's a fact and circumstance test. I applied it. They just don't like the result. That's all she said. You don't like the result.
That's right.
Too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so are they going to go through a trial? Are they going to waste the time? So it's either, to me, the only logical explanation, the moves are come to the table and strike a deal with Ripple, or drop the case. Right. Because I can't imagine they want a month trial where evidence of the speech and all of the stuff came in. Because here's the thing, Brad. State of mind is at issue here, right? So Brad, for Brad to be held recklessness, Brad Garlinghouse can take the stand and he can say, well, why didn't you think XRP was a security? Well, here are these reasons. The FinCEN settlement was a big reason, right? Now the jury's hearing how the government in 2014, before the FinCEN, the Government Accountability Office called us a virtual currency and a decentralized payment protocol. I relied on that. And then there was this speech by this guy named Bill Hinman, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. And he said that because ETH was sufficiently decentralized, that it wasn't security. And I talked to my CTO, his name is David Schwartz, and he told me, well, that's great news, Commander, because the XRP ledger is more decentralized than the ETH network, because they have 55% of the miners in China, and he just starts talking about all that. And so Brad goes, so I was like, well, wow, when you take those things, there's no way the XRP is a security. And so then you can try to get Bill Hinman on the stand and cross-examine him and do all that. Does the SEC, are they going to go through that? And I just don't think so.
Yeah, that's a tough go right there. That is a tough go. I at this point, I wonder if the SEC using leverage, because I don't see them wanting to get out of this without getting a fine so they can claim that public win, even though we all inside the space know really what happened. Missing that opportunity to get that check. The other side of this is that, I don't see the SEC going that far because they really harmed themselves with this regulation by enforcement. The idea is if they get this thing done and put to bed now or as soon as possible, they unfortunately, and I don't like to say this, but it allows them to continue to go after the rest of the space, knowing that the rest of the space doesn't have the money that Ripple has.
No, there's no doubt about it. Are you going to just from you're in business, right?
Yeah.
And from a business manager standpoint, when you have limited resources, a trial that is a month long, that every day, the amount of lawyers and resources the SEC would have to devote going up against Ripple's team, right, which is massively impressive. They're going to have to make a decision. Yes, we want to commit all those resources to a case we're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
Or do they cut bait,
basically,
and say, let's save those resources, dismiss the case, or first talk settlement. If they can't come up with a settlement because Ripple wants to talk about no obstruction to our IPO. Like, if I'm representing Ripple, I'm like, listen, here's what it's going to take. We'll write you this big fat check. But going forward, we need peace of mind.
That's right.
We're not going down the SEC anymore, and we're going to get approval of our IPO.
Yes.
And let's agree to that. And you want a $200 million check. Here it is right now.
That's right.
And I if I'm Brad, I write it.
I definitely feel like, the SEC's last ditch effort is to obstruct the IPO at this point, and that's possibly what gets them to write a check to get this thing done. It's despicable, but nothing we have seen from the SEC has been anything above despicable at this point.
Well, it's despicable, and people got to realize that at the end of the day, if they could get that clarity moving forward, knowing that they were going to IPO, I mean, the reality is XRP probably, let's say it doubles to $1. Yeah. Well, there's your couple $100 million in fine, right? just by a move based on the clarity. And so if you're a smart guy like Brad Garlinghouse, that peace of mind moving forward is going to finally get that dark cloud from over you, because there's still institutions like, and I don't have any inside info, but the Bank of Americas of the world, when there's all this litigation going on and trials, they just like to stay out of it. Even if they disagree with the SEC, they just don't want, they want it all to be nice and clean. Yep. And so the day that Ripple can say, all we're focused on now is growing our business, growing the ecosystem, expanding, and finally driving adoption without a cloud over our head, that's worth a lot. I guess is what I'm saying.
It is worth a lot. And just a couple questions here before we wrap up. These questions were from Mr. BXRP to David Schwartz, but I think you could field a couple of these. Will the judge's ruling in denying the interlocutory appeal activate the use of XRP in the United States, or are there still some hurdles to overcome? I think you kind of answered it. The banks want absolute clarity, right?
I think they want absolute clarity, but I think that their lawyers are telling them that we got closer to that, right? I think that they'd be more comfortable saying it's okay to tip your toe, but these institutions are super conservative.
Yeah. I think that's the one that's most pertinent to ask in that situation. And then, look, let's final thought this thing. Like, what are you seeing not only for Ripple here? And by the way, what percent? We're not going to hold anybody to anything. We 75% settlement leaning in. We leaning in 90% at this point. Where are we at, John?
I mean, I would be at 90%, but Gary Gensler is such a guy that you can't rationale, politics are involved. Elizabeth Warren is involved. Yeah. If you were to take away, Brad, the anti-crypto army agenda, everything that this administration has been going after crypto, if you were to if that didn't exist, I would say 90% sure. Right. Because why wouldn't it? That there's no reason not to. But the problem is with the Coinbase case, still pending, and this anti-crypto agenda, the politics is what stops it. Like what percentage is there? But the SEC would be stupid not to settle.
100%. I completely
mean?
agree. My heart goes out to all of these other crypto projects and companies out in this space, John, that don't have the coffers that Ripple did. Because if we see a settlement, which does appear to be likely at this point, right? Especially with the trial date, you can't have a settlement till you have a trial date. We got all of that. We see what's happening here with denial. I just, my heart goes out to them because I was hoping that we would get the kind of test that would put all of this regulation by enforcement to sleep with a Ripple test, right? Just like the Howey test. And people could use that against what they're doing and know where they need to be, almost like a one-pager on a website, for goodness sakes. But I think they still could do it, but they don't choose to do it, and they do that intentionally. And I believe, personally, it's because we're seeing suppression in the markets through regulatory capture of that agency. I've seen enough myself to see despicable actions that are not protecting investors in that space, but thank goodness you are. One final question for you. What does all of this mean right now for the 75,000 XRP holders? Where's all of that stand at this point?
Well, the thing that's shocking to me is that we haven't had the investigation into the speech by the Inspector General or Congress or whatnot. And so what we need, here's the thing. We still have an opportunity to go after certain individuals for regulatory capture, civil conspiracy to benefit a few versus others. And we have a lot of circumstantial evidence that points the finger that has happened. But we still need the smoking gun to guarantee that we get over a motion to dismiss. And so, and we also need this case to be over. And we're this much closer to this case being over. And so I'm hoping that people just got to remember, I give the example, Brad, of Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff, everyone agrees that the SEC was either grossly negligent or intentionally involved because the whistleblower kept saying, Ponzi scheme, here's the proof. And the SEC did nothing. And then when Bernie Madoff confessed the day after the SEC filed a case against him, but he had already confessed, so that meant nothing. Well, investors sued the SEC in a class action, and that case got immediately dismissed on sovereign immunity and governmental immunity and all that. But those private actors who may have conspired with temporary government agents is a different type of civil conspiracy. But you can bet if a case gets filed like that, then you're going to have the SEC attorneys, you're going to have the biggest, most powerful law firms in the world coming down to try to get that case dismissed. So you have to have more than just circumstantial evidence. But the good news is the statute of limitations has not even come close to running yet. So we just need to keep pushing for someone to investigate. Look what we learned from the SEC emails. Yep. We still haven't, Empower still hasn't gotten all the other emails, Gmail accounts, text messages, phone records. If we can get that stuff, then it's game over. And I think people will be very happy with what happens. I
do too. And congrats to you on winning the ICBLA Inaugural Defender of Freedom Award. It's John Deaton.
Thank you.
John Deaton, thank you so much.
Thank you for support. Listen, as I said when I won that, I meant it. My number one important tweet is I said my efforts would be a fart in the wind if it wasn't for you and if it wasn't for the 74,999 other XRP holders who joined in the fight and fought with me. You know what I mean? I didn't write those affidavits. Yeah. Right. I mean, I drafted them, but they signed them and executed them and they made a difference. You know what I mean? Naomi Brockwell made a difference in letting me fight in the library case. So Everyone should take that award and feel a piece of it. And I mean that 100% from my heart.
Well,
That they
I know
deserve
that
it
you
just as
do,
much as I
man.
do.
You're that kind of guy, John. No doubt about it. And we appreciate you and everything that you're doing. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for coming here and telling everybody what's going on. And we'll catch all of you on the next one.